Thank you, Shelley. I feel like an amateur comedian following Johnny Carson at the Improv here, but we'll try to keep it up. Thanks for the introduction and thanks for the energy. We're going to start this morning with a panel represented by three individuals who bring a unique perspective to the day. Lisa Caputo, who is the head of marketing, chief marketing officer and communications at Travelers. Sean, who heads the digital social strategy at Time Warner Cable, and Channing, who works for Scripps Networks, has been in this space for quite some time, will provide some perspective and help us kick off the day. Will you come on up, please? I think the biggest challenge for us will be getting up out of these chairs. But let me start with Lisa. And first of all, let me congratulate you on Travelers' numbers yesterday. For those of you who may not have been reading the press, Travelers had a great earnings report, beat everyone's expectations, and as a result, Lisa is in a fabulous mood this morning as the head of marketing for Travelers. But as you know, the topic for today is this discussion around cohorts and this discussion around products and media products. You work for an insurance company. And so one of the questions it would beg is this relevant? I mean, you're an industry that sells through agents and owns agents and doing a little more online, but is this whole concept something that is germane to Travelers, and is it something that you're embracing as part of the strategy for the firm?
That's a great question, and thank you for it. Thank you, Shelley. I'm here because of you, and I really appreciate your thought leadership, so thank you. We're absolutely embracing it, and convergence is the word of the day. Everything's converging, and you need your team, be they marketers, communicators, or researchers, to think in a converged world. So as a result, what's pivotal for us and for any brand, I think, is to think about themselves as storytellers and content, and our agents want content. And we are rich with content. We have fantastic content across the company, and we're finding creative ways to tell the stories around that content through an omnichannel approach. But it's really important, I think, in a world that is converging, to make sure you're putting that content out there in a compelling way at the right time when the customers and the prospective customers and businesses want it. So you've got to be really agile and on your toes, and we're doing that. We monitor what's going on in social channels. We think about what our agents want by way of content. We're in a partnership with the Weather Company, which has been a fantastic partnership for us, where we've used the open Facebook graph through My Friends Weather to have an innovative way to get our content out through tips, before, during, and after a storm, for example. Our agents can track their customers who may be in a storm's path. So it's absolutely relevant to us, but it's relevant to every company. And brands, if they want to stay both relevant but also a part of people's lives and get customers to trust them and engage with them and stay with them, they've got to be operating in this world of convergence in a thoughtful way.
Okay, great. Let me just maybe follow up, because you mentioned brand, and when you think about brand, you have one of the, I would say, kind of preeminent brands in your industry. And with all due respect to Mayhem and low prices positioning, this concept of umbrella and the dog with the bone, which is one of my favorites actually, but that concept of being able to have an emotional link in some ways to your clients is a big deal. Is this whole concept of extending this into your brand and trying to figure out how this linkage between product, media, and the strength of the brand is an important thing for you?
Well, I think have to think about marketing R&D, right? So you always want to be thinking about product innovation and having compelling product, so that means you've got to have your fingers on the pulse at all times on the customer, be they a consumer or a business in our case. And, the agents, right? So we do a lot of things to make sure we're in constant communication with all of those different constituencies. And then, we think about the right mix, right? What's the right mix of media to communicate about a new product innovation, a new product rollout, content that they might want in particular. So in so doing, you also want to make sure that you're a socially responsible and good community player as a brand. That's very important both to agents and to customers. And what we've found, just in very public data, that when we've engaged in social channels about content that is talking about our commitment to communities or different community elements that we promote and do in the communities where we operate, we find our engagement in social channels goes up. So while we may not be out there with a microphone, and that's just not our style, when we go out there selectively and strategically, we have the highest engagements in our industry in social channels.
Thank you. Channing, you and I were talking last night, and when you look at your bio, you share an Emmy, and you've been in this world for a long time. As you look at all the developments over the last couple of decades and this discussion around this convergence, this product, this media, and so on, how real is it? I mean, and what's the runway associated with this phenomenon?
So it's very real, and we're sort of living under this new paradigm of a ubiquity imperative. We used to be a television network producing specifically for television, and now we have to be on almost every screen at all times. And it's interesting because in the past, or up still to this day, and going forward, we will be an audience-driven company. At the same time, we have to become a customer-driven company, and we have no DNA for that. That has to be learned behavior because we've never had a one-to-one relationship with an individual. And while we're expanding the audience-based business, we also have to learn that. So there's some metamorphoses that are going on in our company, which are we have to become data-driven. We know a lot about video. We don't know a lot about the mechanism of data or metadata. We have to become a CRM company. We don't know how to do that and still keep the business going. We also have to learn the difference between linear and nonlinear in our world. We know how people behave in a 24/7 linear environment. We've looked at the whole world. We were one of the first to jump into the on-demand world years ago, and yet it wasn't until literally earlier this year that we were able to put dynamically into the video on-demand product advertising that was relevant and actually enough advertising to become a vehicle for profit. So it's a long road. So we're actually on two streams. We're going to be keeping our business growing as a television network. At the same time, we're going to start doing mass customization for individuals.
And what is this? As if I'm an individual, right, and I'm one of your customers, what does this kind of one-to-one interaction or experience start to feel like? I mean, how is that different than sitting there and watching television today? I mean, what does that look like 5 or 10 years
Well,
from
it's
now?
interesting. Shelley and I share this interest in, will we come to a day when content can find its end user, right? And we're kind of getting to that point. What's really interesting about the social side is that social actually is a place to understand the individual and personal. We're seeing through Twitter and Facebook and Pinterest and Tumblr and the others that your social ID will come your personal stamp. And as we increasingly go towards the idea of recognizing our devices with our thumbprints and our individual identification, we then have to be sort of mass producing content specifically for the individual. I heard an interesting analogy from Keith Devlin, who's a Stanford math professor who's teaching a MOOC, massive open online course, and his courses that he taught, he teaches to 65,000 students, and they're free. And yet he said a really interesting thing. He says, unlike teaching in an auditorium of 100, 200 people, when you're teaching to 65,000 and you're using your computer to convey that, it's like teaching one-to-one. And there's an analogy there for us. We sort of have to make sure that we're doing a mass scale so the business runs, but we're actually trying to get to the point of individual mass customization to try to make our content relevant and contextually relevant for anybody in the audience at any time.
Great. Now, Sean, at your company and in your role, you are very much at the center of this convergence. You guys have made a lot of acquisitions recently, and part of your role as strategist is pulling all of this together. From the perspective of Time Warner Cable and this thought about media and product, is that part of what's driving kind of the strategy in terms of pulling together these different parts of the value chain, and what's your perspective on how that's changing the cable industry and perhaps more broadly the whole communications industry?
Wow, that's a serious question. So I'll talk a little bit about kind of some of the things that we've been doing at Time Warner Cable. We've been working very closely with our content partners to take the content and make it available, for, it's kind of trite, but making TV available everywhere, or the four Any's, anywhere, anytime, any place. And people love the content, and we want them to be able to engage in the content wherever possible. Obviously, there are a lot of things that we have to manage from a business point of view, but the goal is to, if someone buys a video subscription, for them to be able to leverage their existing products, whether it's a TV, whether it's a phone, whether it's a tablet, and be able to experience that. And we think, working together with the networks, that we can make that even better experience. People talk a lot about a la carte and all this other stuff, but the experience is there's certain networks that you enjoy, and we find that the average household is watching 30 to 40 networks a week. So they're looking at a bunch of different content, and there's ways that we can work together with the networks to provide tailored content to these different platforms, and also helping with the curation experience. It's very difficult to find 8 hours of entertainment a day, and so we want to work together with the different platforms to be able to allow for that and leverage data and recommendation engines and personalization and the social identities and so on and so forth, to be able to provide people with that lean back experience. We want people to enjoy TV and be able to control whether they want to lean in and engage in it through some level of interactivity, or they want to just kind of sit back and watch Duck Dynasty. I mean, that's what we want them to be able to do. And then in my role, I work in our media group, which works with, we have 600 or so account executives that work with small and medium-sized businesses and some very large businesses to help them with their advertising and marketing solutions across our platforms. So we work with businesses that want to do online advertising, TV advertising, email marketing, and so on and so forth. So we're trying to take what Lisa's talking about in terms of that narrative and apply it to our platforms. So when we work with some clients we've got some clients that we've been working with in Texas, to be able to do promotions that are, and we've got an online display retargeting component, we have an email marketing component, we have a TV component, and we're trying to move the dials and tweak the dials to figure out how do all these things work together. The big agencies can work with Lisa to help her do that, but for some of the smaller, medium-sized clients, we're providing that role. So we see a lot of convergence from a subscriber and a consumer point of view and an entertainment point of view. And we also see it, and we're trying to make a better experience also for marketers, because we want to get the right message at the right time. You don't want to act now message when you're in the middle of watching a football game on TV, but when you're getting an email or when you're looking at waiting in line at the bank, maybe it does make sense for you to have something that you want to react to versus when you're in the middle of a movie or in the middle of the overtime for the Patriots game.
Or in your case, Arsenal, because I know
Yes,
you're a big Arsenal fan, right?
Well, we don't have a lot of advertising, but yeah, I'm a massive Arsenal fan.
So as a consumer of media, I feel like I'm experiencing kind of a big data overload, right? I mean, I try to figure out how to watch, even on a Sunday evening, Ray Donovan, Boardwalk Empire, Mad Men, and I don't have enough time, right? And then it's 5,000 cable channels. It feels like, as you add this content and you make it, I can access this stuff in many different ways. I think for the typical consumer, it almost feels overwhelming. So who's going to make it simple? And what does simple look like and feel like? Because I do feel like there are a lot of different players in this ecosystem. Everyone's trying to do stuff, right? I mean, Lisa's, is trying to create content for individuals like me who want more out of their insurance relationship, and you guys are doing things in your respective platforms. But who's going to make this easier, and when does that actually happen for the typical media consumer?
Well, I mean, sometimes we forget that the cable business was started with trying to basically get people to get the broadcast networks that couldn't reach them in their remote locations. Our job was basically to relay a signal through cable to a house that was too far away to get the signal, or through an antenna. So to go from that to hundreds of channels and live and on demand, short form, long form, across, I think now we're at 6 different platforms, is a massive leap. And I think we wouldn't say that we know everything. We're working closely with the cable networks to understand, well, what's the right kind of content, and is there to enable snacking and enable long form immersion. We're working with the technology providers to figure out, well, what's the best overlay. Cable set-top boxes are not the most. No one would describe them as the most flexible programming environment. We're trying to, we're excited about the opportunities in this, IP development, IP platform, because we're able to leverage the learnings and expertise of others. It's, fraught with danger a little bit, because, other people are trying to do it as well, and those people sometimes want to take our lunch. So it's a balance between, working with the content providers to find the right content, leveraging development and big data to put recommendations and make it an easier experience for consumers. But we also can't forget that content needs to be curated. Right. I mean, that's the role of the networks and others. That 8 hours a day per household is a lot of TV, and to be able to kind of come up with new and exciting and interesting stuff, you can't depend solely on algorithms and scrolling through 500 channels. It's got to be a combination of experience and curation.
And it also has to work for the folks who write the checks, right? Who are the advertisers, right?
Yeah.
So, Lisa, I'd like to get your perspective, right, on all these, the proliferation of these platforms and what that means to you in terms of trying to reach your consumers or prospects.
Yep. Well, I think co-creation and co-curation is important for us. I mean, we look for partners to be able to do that. We're doing things with LinkedIn, which we find interesting and exciting. We get great learnings from those. I think that one thing I did want to share, just listening to the conversation, was not only do you have the convergence that you have to deal with as marketers at corporations and brands, but in the news business, for example, I think you're seeing a lot of convergence. So when you look at CNN, for example, and you see CNN strike a deal with BuzzFeed, that's telling you something, going back to what you were talking about, which is how people are consuming their information. I'm a news junkie, for example. I got all of my news on the Boston bombing from Twitter, from my Twitter feed. And I watch television constantly. I read everything, but I was following that thing real time. And I think to see CNN, which is trying to position itself from a breaking news perspective to strike that partnership with BuzzFeed, and how that's going to integrate and interact, I think goes right to what you're talking about, which is this notion of multi-platform and how people are consuming content. And for marketers like me, we're thinking about that all the time. That's why You want to be responsive marketers, agile marketers, because if you're not, then you're not relevant. And you're really not doing your job as a marketer to get your brand into the conversation and have consumers and agents engage with it. And also, provide your people who are working for you with the necessary tools to live within a converged digital world.
It's interesting. You're in the business of creating content now.
It's funny. I keep
Yeah.
telling
You
people,
call it
we
content.
should think of ourselves as publishers. Social publishing
That's
in
right.
a lot of respects.
So did anybody watch the Walking Dead 2 weeks ago, its launch? Of course, some of us did. There were 3 ads in Walking Dead that were custom designed for Walking Dead. The Microsoft ad, Windows ad, the Blue Moon ad, and Hyundai were all content branded entertainment, but they all had zombie themes in them. In fact, it wasn't an ad specifically that might run outside of Zombieland. It ran inside Zombieland because they were basically sponsored content inside the shows, so much so that the whole advertising world is starting to change into content creation. And with that, it doesn't make it simpler, it makes it much more complex. We know that people hate ads, so they're turning those ads into things that could be more in line with what the content is. But to do that on a mass scale is pretty interesting. It's a complex problem.
Right, but so I think that's absolutely true. We're, and where I'm coming from on the local side, we're seeing kind of the flip side of that coin, but it's a parallel path, is the focus on audience, right? So if there's what we find when we talk to our clients, they're looking for kind of an adjacency, whether it's adjacency to the content, like Walking Dead, which we're able to sell get a lot of money for spots for, or it's the audience. And if it's the Walking Dead audience that they want to reach, they can reach them in Walking Dead, but what happens for the rest of the week? And so what we've been working with is trying to, we don't have some of the national tools. So we're trying to look at the data that we have in our systems, whether it's TV consumption data or online data, to figure out how do we track, follow that audience around and put the right message in front of that audience. But I think these are 2 major parallel tracks, which is the adjacency to the content, which is how do you tailor your message to the content that it's associated with, whether it's football or zombies, or how do you become adjacent to the audience and be able to work with them as they're spending their day and as they're on these multitude of platforms. You can't just say, I'm going to buy the soap operas and be able to follow somebody through the day, because nobody's sitting at home watching soap operas all day.
Well, great. We could probably spend half a day talking about this, but I see Shelley giving me the sign. So, look, thanks for your time. What I would like to do, just kind of maybe a quick perspective from you, closing view. We'll hopefully be back here a year from today, and things will have changed a lot. So, give me your thoughts on one thing that as we sit here today, and a year from now we're sitting here, you'll be able to look back and say, you know what? This one particular thing in the way either we do business at Travelers, or the way that Scripps works, or Time Warner Cable, that you think we would look back on and say, this is something that really was significant in terms of changing the way we interact with this end consumer?
So I'll put it this way. I think we should not be in the business of, in terms of products that we're creating, I don't think we should necessarily be in the business of creating apps. We should be in the business of making business. And the idea of Stuart Brand was right, that information wants to be free, and apps are a nice container for content, but we've yet to see the business side of that, and I think in this next year we're going to see that. In fact, we're going to hear about it today. But I think that's the biggest challenge for us, is to take this new environment that we're in, to be able to do this ubiquity of our content, but make it into a business that works.
Well, I think I'll follow up on that and say, when it comes to business and in the advertising business, or at least in our advertising business, it's about currency, and what is the measurement we're optimizing against. And I think I'm hoping that with all of these IP-enabled platforms and all the data that comes from these platforms, that currency or that measurement that we're optimizing against is going to evolve from a couple of hundred TV households that might be watching TV to the petabytes of data that are out there, and how do we use that in a business way to capture value for both the experience for the content creators and for the distributors.
Great.
Very quickly, because I see Shelley, you know, content is currency for me and for us, and to make sure we're, like I say, we're zigging when everybody else is zagging in terms of our competition, and that we're amplifying in a thoughtful way, and we're measuring it, and we're showing how that social engagement, I'm going to call it, and social publishing is yielding results to the businesses inside our company.
Great. Sean, Lisa, Channing, thanks very much.